The Pontifex Maximo told her she was the only truth, not Vesta. He said it while the oil lamp sputtered. The young, pale Servilia, 9, a Vestal novice, stood rigid before the chief matron. Ash dusted the marble floor of the atrium where the sacred flame was meant to burn eternally. The matron's face was iron. This transgression was not mere gossip. It was fact, carried on the air by the scent of foreign perfume, clinging to a discarded scroll. They had arrested the woman, a healer from the East, but the Pontifex himself was untouchable, wrapped in the sanctity of law. Servilia's small voice cracked again as the matron stared at the hearth. The punishment for the forbidden woman was already fixed. The real danger lay in the words the priest had uttered. The sun, barely a promise over the 7 hills, found Pontifex Maximo Caius Vibius Lentulus, 50s, already submerged in the daily ritual of power. His home, a sprawling, sober edifice overlooking the Forum, buzzed with the muted efficiency of dozens of slaves and petitioners. Caius did not pace. He moved with the measured solemnity of a man whose robes held the weight of Roman religion and law. Today the Senate waited for his ruling on the consecration of new standards for the legions preparing for the Parthian campaign. His authority was absolute in matters divine, and in Rome the divine was the state. He stood before a small private shrine dedicated not to Mars or Jupiter, but to the Lares Familiaris, the spirits of his ancestors. He did not pray, he observed. His face, usually a mask of calm, severe certainty, twitched around the eyes. His hands, clean and strong, trembled faintly as he adjusted a miniature bust of his father. That man, a brilliant, brutal general, had died in a pointless skirmish 5 years ago, leaving Caius with the Pontifex title and a profound sense of inadequacy. Caius was a lawmaker and a statesman, not a man of steel and blood. He carried the duty of his bloodline like a cold stone in his stomach. A young acolytus named Lucius approached, bearing the heavy brass scroll case containing the morning's petitions. Caius accepted it without looking at the boy. "The matter of the woman, Lucius." His voice was low, carrying the smooth, polished quality of marble. "She is held in the Tullianum, High Priest. Governor Silas awaits your decree. The charge is sacrilege and tempting a magistrate." Lucius hesitated, adjusting his tunic nervously. "And the words she spread?" "They are lies woven of desperate grief." Caius cut him short, his gaze hardening. "The only words of consequence are those sanctioned by Rome. Justice will be swift, public, and absolute. The sacred trust must be maintained, Lucius. Rome cannot tolerate weakness in its spiritual bedrock." He walked toward the vast dining hall, already filled with senators and officials vying for his attention. He listened to them, to the political posturing, the endless demands for divine approval of earthly schemes, and dispensed judgments with surgical precision. He was the anchor of Rome, immovable. But inside, beneath the layered tunics and the oppressive weight of the apex, the conical headdress of the priests, there was the ghost of a garden. Not the formal courtyards of the wealthy, but a small, sun-drenched space behind a modest house in Ostia, filled with the scent of unfamiliar spices and the quiet sound of singing. That was where he had met Caelia, the healer, the woman now imprisoned, facing burial alive for sacrilege. Every decree he issued today, every nod of absolute authority, was a blade aimed directly at the secret he had sworn to bury with his father's ashes. He had loved her, a brief, impossible fever that had broken the sacred law and the very foundation of his life. He had ended it himself brutally months ago, fearing discovery. Now she was back, captured not for him, but for a minor political dispute, and the foolish words he'd once whispered to her, words of truth, not of ritual, had been heard. He had to execute her to protect Rome, but more importantly, to protect the vast, fragile structure of his own authority, which was the only thing holding his grief together. He picked up his ceremonial wine cup. The polished silver reflected the weary lie in his eyes. He was the most powerful man in Rome, and he was utterly trapped. Aelius, 20s, moved through the subterranean passages of the Forum like a shadow, not by choice, but by condition. He was a commentariensis, a record-keeper, a minor cog in the sprawling bureaucracy of the prefecture. His job was to transcribe depositions, catalogue evidence, and log the prisoners in the Tullianum, the maximum security dungeon near the main Senate house. The smell of damp stone, fear, and stale torch smoke was his permanent companion. His tunic was perpetually threadbare, and the lack of sunlight gave his skin a permanent unhealthy pallor. Aelius was invisible. No one in the prefecture saw the man who protected the vast, intricate network of Roman law. They saw only the tool that recorded it. This invisibility was his greatest protection. His limitations were many: poverty, no patron, and a stammer that flared when he was anxious or forced to speak publicly. He lived for his quiet duties, counting the days until he earned enough to secure a better future for his younger sister, Livia, who still lived with relatives in a dangerous neighborhood by the docks. Livia's face was the single, fragile piece of beauty he protected fiercely in a world of hard edges. Today, the air in the Tullianum felt heavier than usual, thick with the scent of unusual frankincense. Aelius had been tasked with logging the new prisoner, a woman named Caelia, known only in the logs as the Eastern Sacrilege. The guards had been tense, speaking in hushed, nervous tones about the high-level intervention in the case. He entered the holding cell area, his stylus and tablet ready. Caelia, 30s, though exhausted and dusty, sat upright against the cold wall. She wore simple linen, and her eyes, though clouded with fear, held a strange, unsettling clarity. Her wrists were chafed, but she did not weep or rail against the injustice. Aelius began his mechanical process, listing her meager possessions and recording the charges. Halfway through the transcription of the deposition, the damning statement provided by the Vestal novice Servilia, Aelius froze. He read the words again. The Pontifex said she was the only truth, not Vesta. The words were impossible. The Pontifex Maximo, the law itself, could not speak such blasphemy. It was an outright rejection of the very state he embodied. Aelius's stammer caught in his throat. He had transcribed thousands of lies, exaggerations, and half-truths, but this felt different. Caelia saw the recognition flash across his face, but she remained silent, merely offering a slight, knowing tilt of the head. Aelius continued writing, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He finished the log, sealed the scroll, and handed it to the guard. He knew he should report the contradiction, the impossible danger lurking in that single transcribed phrase. But the Pontifex was untouchable. To speak of this was not just to risk his life, but Livia's future. He retreated quickly, the ink still wet on the scroll, the knowledge burning a hole through his duty. He knew of the secret connection, or at least the potential for one, and he didn't understand the full scope of the danger yet. Where are you watching from today? Caius Vibius Lentulus was presiding over the Judicium Publicum, the official public hearing required before the final decree on a capital case. The setting was the marble-clad Basilica Julia, vast and echoing, crowded with citizens eager for the drama of divine justice. Caius sat elevated, his face impassive, the weight of the gold and purple vestments making him seem larger, more distant. He was the law made visible. Aelius, meanwhile, was stationed at the far corner of the basilica, near the scribe's table. His role was silent, ensuring the physical integrity of the documents, the very scrolls that contained the Vestal novice's damning deposition. He watched Caelia being led in by 2 Praetorian guards. She moved with a strange grace, her eyes scanning the crowd, yet fixing on no one. Caius caught her gaze. It was only for a fraction of a second, an impossible collision across the vast hall of Roman power. The silence between them was profound, thicker than the noise of the assembled crowd. In that instant, Caius saw not the Eastern Sacrilege, but the woman who had taught him that the rigid lines of Roman virtue were sometimes just walls built to keep out light. He felt the old, forbidden love twist with the cold fear of exposure. He looked away instantly, refocusing on the magistrate presenting the charges, his voice clipped and severe. He had to extinguish this light, or it would burn down everything. Aelius, observing the procedures closely, did not look at Caelia. He watched Caius. He knew the Pontifex Maximo's routine intimately from transcribing the official schedules. Caius was always meticulous, predictable, controlled, But Aelius noticed the almost imperceptible tremor in Caius's dominant hand as he gripped the ivory gavel, a tremor not of age but of effort. Then Aelius saw the way Caius's gaze snapped away from the prisoner, too quickly, too deliberately. It was an observation born of habit. Aelius spent his life detailing inconsistencies in witness statements and legal documentation. This was not a legal inconsistency, but a human one. A man of Caius's stature simply did not show anxiety over a common sacrilege case. The reaction was too intimate, too personal. The paths had crossed. Caius was forced to look at the living embodiment of his greatest secret and his inevitable downfall. Aelius, the invisible functionary, was the only person present whose professional training involved recognizing a lie beneath a veneer of absolute authority. He held the scroll that contained the impossible truth, and now he had witnessed the powerful man's reaction to the source of that truth. The hearing proceeded, rigid and merciless. Caius delivered the preliminary finding: sufficient evidence of sacrilege. Final judgment would be passed within 3 days. Aelius tucked the scroll deep into the secured box, his hands now sweating. He had seen the crack in the facade. Something enormous was about to break, and he was standing directly underneath it. The administrative work following the judicium was overwhelming. Aelius spent the next day organizing the evidence for the impending final decree. He was deep in the archives, a vast, cold library of scrolls, when he encountered the detail that snapped his doubt into terrible clarity. He was cross-referencing Calia's initial arrest report with the charges of sacrilege. The official narrative claimed Calia had been arrested near the city gates for illegally practicing foreign healing arts and disseminating subversive religious ideas. This justified the sacrilege charge, but the inventory of her meager belongings, logged upon her entry into the Tullianum, listed 3 objects: a small silver coin, a worn amulet, and a sealed lead cylinder, highly uncommon. Aelius handled the lead cylinder, breaking the official seal with a heavy bronze knife under the archival lamp. Inside, rolled tightly, was a map, not of Rome nor of a military route, but a crude, detailed drawing of the interior layout of the Pontifex Maximo's private residence, specifically marking the route between the master atrium and the sacred ancestor shrine. The map also contained a small, precise inscription in a careful, educated Latin hand: Ad veritatem meum. To my truth. A wave of cold dread washed over Aelius. This was not the property of a vagrant healer. This was a direct, intimate threat, or perhaps a painful souvenir. The map confirmed the emotional inconsistency Aelius had observed in Caius. It suggested a relationship far deeper and far more dangerous than simple sacrilege. It confirmed the impossible truth of the Vestal novice's testimony. Caius Vibius Lentulus had given the woman access to his private life. He was not just tempted, he was implicated. Aelius knew the implication of this knowledge. If he presented the map to the prefecture, he would expose the Pontifex Maximo to public scrutiny, a scandal that could destabilize the entire religious foundation of Rome and lead to civil strife. Caius would not fall alone. Anyone involved, even peripherally, would be crushed. Livia's safety, his one true purpose, would vanish. He could simply log the map as undetermined material and reseal the cylinder. The decree sentencing Calia was already written. Her sacrifice would bury the secret forever. Rome would continue, Caius would continue, and Aelius and Livia would survive. He sat on a low stool, the map shaking in his hands. The weight of the decision pressed down on him, suffocating his breath. He was a clerk, a man of paper and ink, not a moral arbiter of the empire. But if he buried this evidence, he would be actively participating in the execution of a woman whose only crime was loving the wrong man and protecting the monstrous lie of a powerful man. The cold stone floor seemed to amplify his heartbeat. The risk of silence was moral. The risk of speaking was death. He had to choose between his sister's life and the truth of Rome's spiritual leader. The sentencing was scheduled for the evening, a stark event under the unforgiving light of the torches. Aelius had less than an hour. He knew that any direct confrontation was suicide. The prefecture had eyes everywhere, and any sudden movement from a low-level clerk would be instantly curtailed. His mind raced, propelled by the memory of Kalia's calm eyes and the undeniable proof of Caius's personal involvement. He could not, would not, allow Livia's security to be bought with Kalia's life. The scale tipped, driven by a deep, quiet refusal to participate in the lie. Aelius took the lead cylinder, now resealed, and placed it back into the evidence box. Then, he acted with the invisible speed of someone who understood bureaucratic processes intimately. He fabricated a routine transfer request, citing an obscure, seldom enforced senatorial decree requiring the personal review of all high-profile capital evidence by the supervising governor, Silas, prior to sentencing. He did not deliver the box to Governor Silas. He knew Silas was a political ally of Caius and would simply suppress the evidence. Instead, Aelius delivered the evidence box containing the map to the private antechamber of Senator Quintus Balbus. Balbus was Caius's most vocal political adversary, known for his ruthless adherence to the letter of the law and his desire to see Caius stumble. Aelius approached Balbus's personal guard, a massive Gaul named Drusus. He stammered slightly, pushing the box forward. A matter of extreme urgency for Senator Balbus, directly from the prefecture, pertaining to the Eastern sacrilege case. Drusus eyed the clerk with suspicion, recognizing him as a nobody. The senator is preparing for the evening's event. He sees no clerks. Aelius leaned in, dropping his voice to a fierce whisper, losing his stammer entirely in the surge of adrenaline. Tell the senator it is evidence of absolute sacrilege, not by the prisoner, but against the integrity of the Pax Deorum. Tell him the source is the Pontifex's own house. The sudden severity of the clerk, the precise language and the weight of the box gave Drusus pause. He took the scroll box, dismissing Aelius with a curt nod. Aelius did not wait for confirmation. His work was done. He had outsourced the confrontation to someone capable of waging the war. He retreated back into the shadows of the forum, heading not towards his damp lodging, but towards the docks, already formulating a plan to hide Livia immediately. The air was silent for him, unnaturally so, like the moment before a massive stone monument crashes to the earth. He had done his part. He had placed a weapon in the hands of Caius's enemy. The fate of Calia, Caius, and Rome now depended on whether Senator Balbus was greedy enough to open the box before the executioner arrived. Caius Vibius Lentulus was in the final moments of preparing for the execution ceremony, reviewing the ancient texts that codified the punishment for sacrilege. The ritual demanded an absolute certainty of faith and an emotional detachment he was struggling to maintain. He was sacrificing his only truth to uphold the illusion of his perfect honor. A sharp, violent knock rattled the door of his private study. Senator Balbus entered without waiting for an answer, his face tight with controlled fury and barely contained triumph. He did not bow. Pontifex! Balbus spat the title like an insult. He held the small lead cylinder in his hand, the resealed wax now clearly showing signs of tampering. I believe your little sacrilege problem is far more personal than the Senate was led to believe. Caius felt the blood drain from his face. He looked at the cylinder, Calia's cylinder. He recognized the careful, tight weave of the lead casing. He had given it to her himself years ago to protect her herbal remedies. He knew what was inside. Senator, you violate my private residence. This is an outrage, Caius managed, his voice steady despite the seismic shift in his gut. Balbus tossed the cylinder onto Caius's polished oak desk. It rolled open, spilling the crude map onto the sacred texts. Your private residence? This is a map to your private, personal altar. Written on it, to my truth. Whose truth, Caius? Vesta's or the Eastern concubines? The senator did not wait for an answer. The truth is, Pontifex, you have engaged in Nephesiad, an unholy act, with a foreign heretic. You have violated your sacred vows. This map, procured from the evidence log by a low-level clerk, who I assure you will be found, proves your hypocrisy. You are sentencing her to death to hide your own treason against Rome. Caius stood rigid, the ceremonial apex on his head suddenly feeling like a crushing weight of stone. His mind, trained for decades in legal maneuverings, was already calculating the escape routes. The execution was minutes away. If Balbus presented this map to the Senate now, Caius would face forced abdication, exile, or worse. The secret, which was supposed to die with Kalia, was now a public political weapon. "This is baseless slander," Caius asserted, though his voice lacked its usual commanding resonance. "A forgery by a desperate woman." "Do not insult my intelligence," Balbus sneered. "I have already confirmed the source in the prefecture logs. The clerk Aelius made sure I found it. You have protected the wrong person, Caius." The urgency became a consuming fire. Caius had to neutralize the evidence and silence Kalia before she could be used to confirm the map's validity. If Kalia spoke under interrogation, even Balbus's political power could not save him from the mob's righteous fury. He reached for the alarm cord, but Balbus blocked him. "You move, and I release this evidence to the Tribunus Plebis. Instantly," Balbus threatened. "The execution is in 5 minutes. Stop the sentence, Pontifex. Admit your corruption, and perhaps we can negotiate your honorable retirement." Caius looked at the map, at the familiar, tight handwriting of the inscription. He saw his own betrayal reflected in the polished lead. He was trapped between the man who demanded his power and the woman who held his heart. There was only one way to reclaim control: break the ritual entirely. The massive bronze doors of the execution chamber opened to a low, ominous roar of the crowd. Kalia was being led to the Campus Sceleratus, the field of wickedness. Caius arrived not through the ceremonial entrance, but through a side portico, his robes flapping around him, Balbus shadowing him like a vulture. Caius ignored the standard protocol, walking directly past the magistrates and the silent Vestal guards. He stopped a few feet from Kalia. The guards held her firmly. Her face was calm, resigned to the cold earth that awaited her. "Kalia," Caius's voice echoed across the open space, raw and stripped of ceremony. "You were charged with sacrilege against Vesta and the integrity of the Roman state." Kalia raised her chin. "I confess nothing against Vesta. I confess only that I sought truth where I found it." Balbus stepped forward, holding the lead cylinder high. "She seeks to protect the true culprit, citizens. The Pontifex Maximo himself violated his sacred vows." A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Caius ignored Balbus. He fixed his gaze on Kalia, an act of such public intimacy it shocked the observers into silence. "You speak of truth," Caius said, his voice now shaking slightly. "The testimony stated that I called you my only truth. Is this true, Kalia?" Kalia held his eyes. She saw the fear of a powerful man facing total ruin, but she also saw the genuine, desperate residue of love. She could save him, or she could condemn him. She had nothing left to lose, but his fall would drag the state into chaos. "It is a lover's grief, High Priest," she said, her voice clear and carrying. "Empty words of devotion, not a statement of religious doctrine. My arrest was just. I practiced forbidden arts. I tempted a man of God with false beliefs. I am guilty of sacrilege against the purity of the faith." It was a lie, a final act of devotion and sacrifice. She took the entire weight of the accusation upon herself, protecting his position, the stability of Rome, and the memory of their brief, impossible bond. Balbus shouted, "She is covering for him. I have proof. The map." Caius moved swiftly. He reached into his robes and produced a small silver dagger, not the ritual kind, but a hunting knife he carried for protection. He slashed the ropes binding Kalia, freeing her hands, an astonishing breach of protocol. The guards faltered, unsure how to react to their high priest's actions. "Kalia has confessed her crime and accepted the judgment of Rome," Caius announced, his voice regaining some of its authority. "But Rome is merciful to those who show contrition." He looked at Balbus, then back at Kalia. Their gaze locked. He was offering her life, but at an immense price. He was offering her exile, anonymity, and immediate escape, instead of the terrifying death of being entombed alive. Balbus lunged, trying to grab the map, but Caius's guards intercepted him. "Flee, Kalia, now, and never return to Rome." His command was final, absolute. He had chosen human life over absolute honor, sacrificing his public reputation to protect her, even if she had just protected him. The lie was exposed, but the consequence was now in motion. Kalia hesitated only a moment, then ran, disappearing into the chaotic edge of the surrounding crowd. The immediate aftermath was pandemonium. Caius's unprecedented act of freeing the condemned woman and publicly contradicting the official sentencing caused a riot in the Basilica Julia. Senator Balbus was screaming treason, waving the lead cylinder like a flag, demanding the immediate arrest of the Pontifex Maximo. Caius stood his ground, letting the chaos wash over him. His authority was shattered, but his life was not yet lost. He used his immense political training to stabilize the situation, but the price was devastatingly clear. The next morning, under intense political pressure, he was forced to address the Senate. He did not deny the map, nor the intimacy of the inscription. He framed it as a profound weakness of the flesh, a brief madness cured by duty, confirming Caelia's lie. He argued that the woman's flight proved her guilt, and his action to release her was a demonstration of a merciful deity, rather than a political cover-up. The Vestal College, humiliated by the suggestion of their high priest's sacrilege, demanded a thorough investigation of his entire tenure. The ultimate consequence was a political execution without blood. Caius was forced to abdicate his title as Pontifex Maximo. He retained his senatorial rank to prevent Balbus from immediately seizing control and initiating a wider purge, but his influence was destroyed. He retreated to his family estate, disgraced, stripped of the power that had defined him. He had chosen the small truth of Caelia's life over the great lie of his own public existence. Meanwhile, Aelius, the small clerk, paid a quieter, more personal price. Balbus, consumed by fury at being thwarted, launched a meticulous search for the clerk who had delivered the evidence. Aelius successfully got Livia out of the city and into the care of trusted contacts in Campania, ensuring her safety. But Aelius himself was caught days later, hiding in the slums. He was not charged with treason, as his action was technically delivering evidence, though to the wrong official. Instead, Balbus had him summarily dismissed from the prefecture and placed on the tabula prescripta, the list of those permanently banned from any official Roman employment. Aelius was ruined, a pariah stripped of his means and his future in Rome. He had lost everything material, his job, his status, his meager savings, for a principle he could barely articulate. His greatest loss was the forced separation from Livia. He was a survivor now, but a broken one, wandering the dusty back roads out of Rome, carrying only the clothes on his back and the cold certainty that he had saved an innocent life. Both the powerful man and the humble man had paid an irreversible price for the truth. Months later, the dust settled on the political earthquake in Rome. Caius Vibius Lentulus, now just a private citizen in a villa outside Tarracina, found a peculiar stillness in his new life. He spent his days in the neglected gardens, finding a perverse freedom in the loss of duty. The weight of the apex and the law was gone. He was merely Caius, a man who had loved and paid dearly for it. One evening, a messenger arrived, bearing a small, heavy pouch containing Roman silver, far more than the required fee for a service. Tucked inside the pouch was a scrap of linen, smelling faintly of foreign spices. On the linen was a single, crudely drawn illustration, a stylized sun over a simple hut, and beneath it, a tiny inscription, Ostia's shoreline. It was Caelia's hand. She was alive, safe, and sending a silent message of gratitude and location, a dangerous, loving invitation. Caius looked at the map. He could remain here, in safe, comfortable exile, or he could risk everything one more time for the fragile hope of a life built on a foundation of truth, however humble. He dismissed the guards and ordered his most trusted servant to prepare a small carriage. Taking only what he could carry, he left the marble villa, abandoning the ghost of his former power entirely. Meanwhile, Aelius reached Campania, penniless but driven. He found Livia working at a small olive press, healthy and surprisingly resilient. His immediate task was completed, but he remained a pariah. Unable to work with his mind, he turned his strong, calloused hands to physical labor, earning just enough to survive. One afternoon, working the press, a quiet, cloaked man approached him. It was Caius. Caius did not offer sympathy or political protection. He offered something far more valuable. I understand you have skill in recording truth, Aelius. I am embarking on a journey. My conscience demands I record the true history of my time as Pontifex, detailing the corruption I failed to stop, and the dangers Balbus and his kind pose to the Republic. I need a scribe who values integrity above gold. Aelius looked at the disgraced former Pontifex. He saw not the powerful man of the Basilica, but a fellow exile broken and seeking redemption through honest work. The offer was dangerous, carrying the risk of further retribution from Balbus, but it was also a validation of his own sacrifice. Aelius accepted. The powerful man and the humble clerk, bound by a shared secret and a shared loss, left Campania together, heading east, toward the small solace of Ostia's shoreline. They were no longer defined by the weight of Roman power, but by the quiet dignity of choosing the truth. Their journey was not toward grandeur, but toward a fragile, hard-won hope. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales like this one.